Hello, I'm Jeff, and welcome to Snap Talk, your podcast supplement. So I tried to do a reaction video to the Nindie Showcase that Nintendo did, but unfortunately, noon on March 20th was the exact same time Steam decided to update Tekken 7 for me, which caused the entire stream to be lagging throughout. And since I don't like to fake reactions or recreate my reactions, that idea went nowhere. So in lieu of actual reactions, here's my take on the showcase. It was alright. There were some fine-looking games that were announced to come, with some releasing first on the Switch. However, I would have liked to hear about some other games, like when the King Knight DLC for Shovel Knight is coming out, or when Hollow Knight will release. But for what was shown, it was alright. The Banner Saga trilogy is a good pickup for the system. Mark of the Ninja was a great game, so I hope the remaster is good. Other games that caught my eye were Poda? Bad North, and The Messenger. Of course, the good doesn't end there. Earlier in the month, we had the first full Nintendo Direct of the year with a number of games announced for both 3DS and Switch. And because I was too dumb to even think about recording reactions, here's my take on it. I thought it was well done. I enjoyed a lot of the announcements, some of them catching me off guard, like the Luigi's Mansion 3DS remaster and the Crash Bandicoot port. It got a little slow at the end with ARMS and Splatoon 2, but a lot of positives from this. But it seemed like if you looked at the usual Nintendo guys on YouTube, they seemed down on this Direct. Now, I'm not one to tell you how to feel about something as subjective as this, but it seemed like the common criticisms were about games being on the 3DS and a bunch of ports coming to Switch, both reasons seemingly being unwarranted. I think one of the things that sort of irks people about new games coming to the 3DS is that they sort of expected the system to be dropped, similar to the Wii U when the Switch released. That was never going to happen, guys. I don't know if you know this, but the 3DS has an install base of, 55 million, maybe 60 million worldwide. The Switch only has 15, 16 million. I mean, just do the math. There's a larger install base with the 3DS. And I don't know if you noticed this from the Direct, but there's a couple of games that were announced that use similar engines to games that were already released on the system. First of all, you had Luigi's Mansion, which we had Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon back in 2013. And then you had the remake of Mario and Luigi Bowser's Inside Story, which as a series has seen 3 games released on the 3DS. 2 original games, and then there was the Superstar Saga remake that came out last year. So if they were looking to show support for the system, which they kind of should do, seeing as they have third parties that are releasing games on the 3DS this year, and maybe into next year, then at the very least, those 2 games are something that they could easily, well, not easily, but easily, comparatively speaking, bring out, because they already have the engines for it. They just need to make sure that all the assets are in the right place compared to the original games. And to be fair, some of these games probably were in development for a while before the Switch took off. Remember, the Switch is just a year old, and it was in Nintendo's best interest to make sure they had something for the 3DS in case the Switch bombed. Now, thankfully for them, the Switch is doing just fine. But that doesn't mean that you just stop developing what you've already started making. You have to push through and finish the job. So that's pretty much all I see out of these games, is that Nintendo had them being worked on in the early days of the Switch, or even before the Switch really started to take off. And this is, in my opinion, this is probably the last big group of games that Nintendo's going to release on the system. There might be a remake of Partners in Time, but I don't really see much else coming from Nintendo proper. And then we talk about the ports. Oh, were there people upset about there being ports? To which I gotta say, well, which style of port? Because a port isn't necessarily a port. Take, for instance, this Direct. You have your games that were popular, so they get put on everything, i.e. Undertale. You have your games that were popular that are getting remastered onto everything, Okami HD, Dark Souls Remastered. You have games that were timed to a different console so they couldn't initially come over. Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy. Games that the developer probably waited to bring over to see how the console would sell, South Park. And games that were well received but were on low selling consoles, so they're getting resold on the more popular console, Captain Toad and Hyrule Warriors. These ports aren't all done for the same reason. And ports aren't necessarily a bad thing. I don't know who gets it in their head that ports are a bad thing. Maybe they think that the main development team is working hard on the port rather than on a new IP. Guess what? The main development team is working hard on the new IP. Someone else is working on the port. You remember the ports of Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask onto the 3DS? Those weren't done by Inuma. Those weren't done by Miyamoto. Those were done by Grezzo. Nintendo, they had an overseeing eye on it, but it was the company Grezzo that did the port of it. Japan Studio, I'm sure, had a hand in the recent remaster of Shadow of Colossus on PS4, but it was Bluepoint that handled the remaster. Japan Studio is doing something else. But I'm sure there are some people who are like, well, why didn't they come out when they were initially released? Well, some of them couldn't honestly come out when they were initially released. But let's look at something like South Park. Specifically, South Park: The Fractured But Whole, which released last year. Now, why not release it last year on the Switch? Well, one, maybe Ubisoft wasn't quite sure the Switch would do well, so they wanted to wait. But two, it's also, as much as they say that the Switch is easy to port to, it's also much different hardware than high-end PCs, PS4, and Xbox One. So you got to put time into working on that hardware. Now, they have worked on the hardware with Mario and Rabbids Kingdom Battle, but that's also a much different game than something like South Park. Look, ports aren't a bad thing. If you never had the systems to play those games and they come to the system you have, that is a good thing. And if you have it on a different system already, that's fine. Play it on that system and ignore it on this one. And if you wanted the big guns, well, E3 is less than 3 months away. Remember that. And that is it for this episode of Snap Talk. If you liked what you saw, please like, comment, subscribe, and share with others. If you have a different opinion to what was stated, feel free to comment down below and we can talk about it. If you have an idea for another Snap Talk, leave a suggestion below, and if I feel I can get enough material together, I may talk about it in a future episode. I'm Jeff from Some Nerdy Arguments, and I'll talk to you soon.